All right. I just talked a little bit about distributive property, made a couple videos on that. Now the inverse or the opposite would be factoring. So previously we looked at something like, let's say 4 times the quantity of x plus 2, okay? And then we came up with 4x plus 8. Well, what if you started with the 4x plus 8 and you wanted to find an equivalent way of writing it out by factoring, by taking out the factor that both terms shared? Think of it like greatest common factor, like when you're working with fractions. So think of these numbers or terms. In this case, we've got a 4 times an x, and this one just has an 8. So because both terms do not have an x variable, look at just the numbers. What factor does both 4 and 8 share? And remember, factors are the numbers that when you're multiplying together, you get your answer. So notice that 4 is divisible by 4, and so is 8. 8 is also divisible by 4. So we could say that the factor of 4 and 8 is 4, or the greatest common factor, because really they also have 2 as well as 1. But the greatest common factor would be 4. Now, if I divide 4x by 4, I'm just going to have x. And then if I divide 8 by 4, I'm going to get 2. And notice I ended up where I started in that example. So let's just talk, I just want to give you a few examples on factoring. Let's say we have 3x plus 6. Think of the greatest common factor between the two terms. We've got 3. Now divide each term by that factor, and that will tell you what's inside the parentheses. So 3x, 3 divided by 3 is 1. The leftover is going to be 1x or x. Positive 6 divided by 3 is going to be positive 2 or plus 2. And if you weren't sure that you were correct, you could just double check. You could say, well, 3 times x, that's 3x. And 3 times 2, that's going to be a positive 6. Okay? And that's what I started with. Let's try another. Let's do, this one might seem a little tricky. We've got negative 2x plus 10. Now there's a couple ways you could write this. If you think of the greatest common factor between the two terms, it could be either a 2 or a negative 2. And so you could write it, let's say we have negative 2. So negative 2x divided by negative 2 is going to give you a positive x, or a positive 1x, so positive x. And 10 divided by a negative 2 is going to give you a negative 5. Okay? And again, if you want to double check, negative 2 times x is going to be a negative 2x, and a negative times a negative is a positive 10. Now another way, instead of factoring it by negative 2, we could factor it by a positive 2. If you divide negative 2 by a positive 2, that's going to give you a negative. So a negative x, and then a negative, 10 divided by a positive 2 would be a positive 5. Now, which one is better? I would say you want to try to avoid having negatives associated with your variables, but both are going to work. Both are fine. Fair game. I'm going to give you a challenge one here and see if you could figure it out. Say we have 48x squared plus 36x. So let's just look at the number part, and then we'll look at the variable part. What do you think is the greatest common factor between the 48 and the 36? Well, if you guess 12, you're correct. Okay. Now, we're not just going to have 12 on the outside and everything in the inside. Notice we have an x squared and a x. So both of those have an x variable, right? So if we divide 48 by 12, we're going to get 4, because 4 times 12 is 48. And we know that x times x is x squared. So if we're dividing x squared by x, we're going to have one more x left. Because this is a positive and this is a positive, I can go ahead and put my addition there. So 36 divided by 12 is 3. Now x divided by x, that's going to cancel it, so we're just going to keep it at the 3. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and double check. 12 times 4 is 48. X times x is x squared. 12 times positive 3 is plus 36, or positive 36 times the x. And that's what we started out with.